Welcome to A Dragon's Voice. My name is Ruan Hayden. I had a really hard time in preparing for this episode. So many things are going on in the world today that I could do a personal commentary on. The return of the Taliban in control of Afghanistan, the ever-encroaching religious right in our Christian theocracy, the bastardization of various occult ideas and practices, the racism which is rampant in many neo-pagan organizations. A Dragon's Voice was established to pull the veil from the eyes of my listeners, or at least give them concepts to ponder, to meditate upon, and to come to their own conclusions. I do not claim to be anyone important. I do not even know it all. No one can truly know it all. I was raised in a household of fear, abuse, and neglect. From the ripe young age of 7 years old, I have traveled the path of my own device. I've read thousands of books. I have studied in depth the rationale of my own religious persecution. A discrimination which has definitely shaped my views of certain paradigms. And a rampant anger over seeing these same paradigms being enforced upon my fellow humans in sometimes violent ways. I am passionate about pulling said veil back and looking at the deeper psychological reasons for much of the pain and suffering in this world, including the way that we treat each other. I was reading a snippet from another book by Robin Artison. Yes, I constantly refer to his works, because his own words match many of my own conclusions. One of these quotes touched me deeply, and I want to share it with you, especially based after my experiences in the last week concerning these topics. And I quote from him: "You cannot claim to belong to a revealed religious tradition that claims to be the unique truth above and beyond all other religions in the world, while living your own extremely personal and idiosyncratic view of it and what it teaches. You don't get to be a green lady or a green man hippie while blithely excusing the two revealed religious philosophies on this planet, Christianity and Islam, that have destroyed everything else you claim to stand for. You don't get to be seen as a good guy by everyone on all sides. You will have to disappoint someone. To be everything to everyone is to be nothing to anyone. The sacred powers require that people who know the truth of life in this world take a stand. They will not give you the time of day at the level of soul-to-soul meeting if you try to honor them as creations of the Christian or Muslim God, when they are not creations of any such God. The spirits of nature will not bless you if you give your thanks to God in heaven, and not to the mother of plants and beasts, and not to them directly, for all they do, and for all they are, individually and presently." End quote. That was from Letters from the Devil's Forest. Now, the true old ways can never, absolutely never, be lived so long as one holds tolerance of intolerant groups of people who hold that they have the one true way. What are the true old ways, you ask? People tell me that this reminds them of the very faith to which I am at odds. Before monotheism, there was polytheism. But even before polytheism, in the sense of pantheons, which was very much influenced by anthropocentric thought, was animism. So when I refer to the true old ways, I mean the historically proven animistic worldview and practice of our most ancient of ancestors. The idea that nature itself is indwelled by entities which we once had intimate contact with. Entities that we learned and interacted with. Now, some of these may have appeared to us as human seeming entities, but to say that they are indeed in the shapes of humans is a misnomer. For these persons can appear as they wish or they need in order to interact with us humans. The same goes for the names which we give these entities, or the names by which they wish to be called. Names for them tend to be translated as various titles, which can give us a hint at their nature. The true old ways does not have the connotations that the revealed religions have when they say the one true way. But Ruan, we live in more enlightened times, where we have the freedom to believe, live, and practice our individual and collective faiths, relatively free from persecution. Surely we'd be tolerant of our insert religious tradition here. Do we really? Yes, we don't have a powerful organization like the Catholic Church to use its Inquisition to punish heretics. We do not have the Puritan persecution of women who may be pleasing to the eyes of men, or hold wealth that others may be envious of. The witchcraft trials no longer hold us in fear of burnings and hangings and other manner of sadistic acts. But are we really free of these things? It is my expressed opinion that no, we are not free. Do you know how many self-proclaimed witches live in fear? If not in the United States, then across the globe? The witch craze never ended in America or Africa. People by the thousands are still being murdered by people influenced by monotheistic faiths. Fear of those whom are different from us still hold power over the planet. These people can be found in all walks of life. Many hold positions of authority and power over our lives. Look at the Taliban. Christian nationalists are much different. While they claim fear over Sharia law, they likewise wish to place their Christian laws upon the populace of the nations in which they reside. What about those who are more open and lenient in their interpretation of Scripture? Deep within almost every verse of their scriptures are little tidbits of indoctrination and intolerance. So long as even one of them secretly hopes to convert anyone else, there will always be a form of intolerance for other people's paths, and most particularly, those that hold to the multiplicity of powerful entities, those pagans, those unbelievers. And their secret desire is that their scriptures are true, that the world will end, and those who aren't believers will be destroyed, leaving the world for them alone. If you open up the book of Revelation and simply begin reading it as an unfolding scenario, it goes something like this. There'll be wars and famines and disease epidemics and heavenly signs that will alert the world to some sort of crisis. Then will come an antichrist, as he's called, or a political ruler that will establish control over the whole earth. He'll be backed up with a religious ruler who is called the false prophet. They together will establish a unified social, economic, and religious system that dominates the world. The only thing opposing them are the people of God, and those two prophets, they are called the two witnesses, who appear in Jerusalem and begin to speak against this power. The rest of the book, really the last half of the book, is about the overthrow of this system. The beast, the false prophet, who has the number 666, the Antichrist, is overthrown with judgments and plagues. Most of them are very cosmic. Asteroids hitting the earth, the water turning to blood, and that sort of thing. Until finally, Jesus Christ returns as a warrior on a white horse and sets up the kingdom of God. Essentially, this book, Revelations, and those who take it to be the literal word of God, and those who have been made to believe in its words in any way, shape, or form, hope and pray for it to be fulfilled. It's a book about the wrath of their God being poured out upon the world. People not repenting, except for the small group of faithful followers of God. And this awful, wicked beast power ruling the whole world and defying God, shaking his fists at God. And finally, Jesus coming, not as a Prince of Peace at all, not as a lamb, but at the end of the book, as a rider on a horse, a warrior with a sword to smite the nations. And one of the quotes that comes to my mind says, if I remember correctly, he will rule the nations with a rod of iron, as a potter strikes a pot with iron and it just completely shatters. Doesn't this itself show an attitude of intolerance? The secret hope of the return of Jesus Christ to the earth, to kill off humanity and promising those who accepted him a new paradise. That all those who, like myself, choose to look at our world in a different lens, to be utterly destroyed if I don't accept their worldview and their Messiah as my own. This is the end goal of many people, and most particularly fundamentalist Christians. Anyone who has done an in-depth study of Christian doctrine, such as I have, the interpretations of the same, and looked at current world events, can almost see how these things look as if they are coming to pass. I have studied the realm of prophecy intensely due to my own experiences growing up, visions, dreams, and how many of them have seemingly come to pass. And I know I'm not the only one who sees these things. What if I told you that many, and I mean millions of people who secretly hope these things happen, actually have tried to create the conditions of the same in order to achieve the end goal of a theocracy, to prepare the way of the Lord? When I was growing up, it wasn't as clear that this was the dream. Within my home, even being interested in other faiths was looked down upon. In fact, any and all materials that even hinted at Wicca, witchcraft, paganism were burned. From books, to tarot cards, to even Magic the Gathering playing cards, to my journals, and even written documents from my grandfather, which I painstakingly copied by hand and hid in binders and nooks and crannies in my room. I literally lived under a domestic inquisition. I was always grounded. I was beat. I was socially isolated. And I know I'm not alone in this. The problem is that we, people like me, were brainwashed to believe that not only were these things wrong and evil, but that we ourselves were chosen by Satan to be evil if we manifested any sort of psychic power or magical talent. Even today, we look back at our childhoods and can understand where our parents and our religious leaders were coming from. And we are the ones who need to apologize. We! Do you know how many metaphysical shops have been destroyed or attacked? I know of at least 10 growing up that had rocks and bricks thrown through the windows. People that have lost their jobs and even kicked out of school because they wore a pentacle or other such pagan symbol. So, who is persecuting who? I know that many of my colleagues say that these conditions no longer exist, that some sort of better world is coming. It's these myths, these false and unwise ideas that allow these things to continue. The idea that we can hold these ideas deep in our subconscious through propaganda, such as, for me growing up, focus on the family, which brainwashing I am still working on. The messages stream from our pulpits and even our political leaders which, for the last 30 plus years, have sought political dominance through whatever means. And I really mean the Republican Party, the party of traditional family Christian values, values that influence everything else about our culture, such as our banking systems. We recently saw certain banking issues cracking down on sex work trade. They claim this is for the protection against sex trafficking and halting the transfer of funds of the same. But in the end, this is going to hurt millions of men and women in a variety of ways. Who determines what is wholesome and what is not? The same people that have had the stranglehold on the minds and souls of the same people that control big business. Those who are influenced by radical evangelicals. Those who misinterpret those deeply held scriptures, which have tormented the world for over 2 millennia and more. And so I ask you, my viewers, can we really be tolerant? I say no. We cannot be tolerant. We cannot just stand back and bury our heads in the sand. We cannot just turn a blind eye and focus on our craft, our own personal practices, and hope and pray that what happened in Afghanistan doesn't happen here. We cannot hope that what led to the January 6th insurrection doesn't happen again, because it will at some point in our future. And next time, it might actually be successful. Successful due to complacency. Successful due to the rising numbers of individuals that are being radicalized before our eyes. They believe they are being persecuted. They've always believed that they were being persecuted. But if we look at history, we see that their deeply held beliefs, the take up your sword and follow me mentality, is only going to grow. There have been individual radicals, from Jim Jones and the Branch Davidians, to focus on the faulty and Fox News with their fear-mongering of the Democrats this, the Democrats that. The belief that a satanic cabal is running the world behind the scenes to bring about the rise of their antichrist in a new world order. The idea that vaccines are going to brainwash the masses and turn them into sheeple. Masks, for heaven's sake. These things are nothing new. In the end, their hope of a Messiah to save them from us is all that matters. And how they get there doesn't matter either. They will use all their power to do to the rest of us what they believe we have done to them. So what can we do? We neo-pagans have a deeply held concept of not proselytizing, of not getting into heated discussions, because they wouldn't listen anyways. All the while, they blast the airwaves, using their financial gain to influence us. Gain that they've taken from the pocketbooks of their followers. I recently received, unsolicited, tracts from the Jehovah's Witnesses. A letter from my former church, the LDS Church, to come back. Ads left and right from various evangelicals while watching YouTube. Ads on television commercials. Automated emails, and so much more. These passive-aggressive attacks, which is what they really are bombarding us left and right. What do? We do videos. We get out there. We use our voting power en masse to oust them from office. We use our finances in healthier ways by boycotting and calling them out, by promoting and helping our fellow witches in the pursuits of their goals and dreams. We blast their faces on the news. We use their words against them. This is indeed a voice of a dragon. Within the image of the dragon, we see the end game that they desire. The more we fight against their injustice, the more they feel attacked. But can we just let them do what they will, hoping that they will go away? We have done that for far too long. The only Armageddon that will come is the Armageddon that they devise and implement. Time is not a linear creation. Time is a series of interconnecting rhizomatic interactions. It is a spider's web, with each strand connecting in certain nodal points. By being aware of these actions on the world and local stage, we can begin to intuit the next possible event. We should really do an in-depth study of prophecies, for it will give us a greater understanding of what possible steps we can take. This is an alarm. This is a slap in the face, a pulling the head out of the sand. We cannot effectively make changes to create healthy and happy relationships with others if we do not understand what makes other people tick. We cannot just stand aside. Witchcraft has always been political. Witchcraft has always been an attack on the status quo. So, let us go out there. Let us speak our minds and no longer be afraid. And for those of you that still must hide in fear, I see you. I was you. And I pray that one day you will be free. Quote, "And as a sign that you are free, you shall be naked in your rights," the charge of the goddess states. In the earliest days of Wicca, this meant that you should actually be naked in your rituals, but has lately come to mean that you shall be open, with perfect love and perfect trust in the old gods and with each other. Today, I see it more of being open, without fear of the reprisals of your persecutors, to speak your truth, to stand for your life. Because so long as Christianity and Islam seeks to control you, you shall never be free. A dragon's voice is named after, not the red dragon of Revelations. It is named after the motto of the Red Dragon of Wales, from which my heritage lays. The motto in English states, "The red dragon provides impetus," or "The red dragon leads the way." And this way has always been about freedom. Freedom from oppression, freedom from cultural and religious genocide, freedom from those who wish to control you. And the dragon, anciently, was a symbol of wisdom, of individuality, and as a collective symbol for all of nature's creatures, seen and unseen. If you wish to have your voice heard, reach out to me, and I will give you airtime on our show. You likewise are a voice of the dragon. Let your voice roar. So mote it be. Now, that is the end of the script that I wrote. And the reason I wrote that is the experiences I have personally had recently. The seeing of the news about the rise in Afghanistan of the Taliban, the insurrection, the personal persecution that I've seen among my friends, from people, mostly family, that claim to love and cherish them, but in reality wish to see their belief system destroyed, utterly annihilated, because Jesus is coming, because to not follow their scriptures is certain death, either at the hand of their make-believe God, their artificial elemental that they've created and expanded upon for centuries without end, or by them their very selves, through political maneuvering, from just downright evil acts that they do all in the name of their God and their religious faith. Even among a lot of people that I know that are liberal Christians, who look at their scriptures, picking and choosing and stuff, which ones that they hold dear and true and which ones are no longer relevant, such as to have tattoos as a sin, to wear clothing with, made from two different substances a sin, to have crops of different types mixed in together, which is funny because that's how the natives grew their cultivated stuff. Each herb would help the other herb grow. The idea of sharing meat, sharing community feasts with pagans is a number one example. The idea of you shouldn't hang out with them. They're a bad influence on you. They believe in Satan, and all those things. These things happen very frequently. In fact, I remember a few months ago, I was watching TikTok, which I do very sparingly now. I'm so busy with work and all that stuff that I do, about a woman who lived on a military base, who was openly pagan and would decorate her yard with witchy type things, and some things weren't even witchy at all. And he was tormented by a neighbor, and even the base commanders and stuff like that, the MPs and stuff, had enforced these same discriminatory practices. And so it is these reasons that I started doing videos in the first place, mostly just to get out what I've seen, what I've experienced, sort of a social rant, a little bit of a view from, someone who has lived the persecution, that has seen firsthand the violence inherent within Christian doctrine, even among those who claim to love me, to cherish my existence, that brought me into this world. And I know I'm not the only one who has suffered these self-same things. Being beat with belts, choked, pushed, shoved, ignored. I was one of those. And yes, maybe it has influenced my anger and the way I practice my craft, the way I express myself. And people say, even among pagans, that, oh, you're a pagan now, love and peace, forgive your persecutors. But see, that's what allows it to continue. It's the same with, and I recently announced this on a post last couple weeks. Everyone in my circle of influence has always come to me for advice, for guidance, to confess their issues and seek some sort of help. And I think the one that hurts me the most, the one that I did not stand up and say no against, was almost half of my ex-girlfriends were molested, and I did not speak up. Which I really should have. And it's the same thing with all my friends that have received abuse by their loved ones for even being curious about, hell, even other churches, synagogues, and mosques. Or even just going out in the woods, creating a little circle in the dirt, and meditating. Even those who practice yoga. I mean, I remember, the backlash and stuff when certain of those ideas infiltrated the education system. Even though the end result of those same practices increased student learning, caused people to not want to sit there and skip school, increase their grades, and just general quality of life. And now I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't have those things involved in the education system. That's not up to me. I don't want to be one of those people to control other people and their children, because that's everything I rail against. But the thing is I know we all see injustice. We all see violence, domestic violence, religious violence, mental manipulation, emotional confusion, mostly by those we love and care for. And the thing is, if we don't want to see another insurrection, another civil war that many people like me have preached from the rooftop saying, hey, enough is enough. Wake up, people. This stuff is going on. That if we don't speak out and actually do something, it's just going to get worse. We see radicalization within the United States reaching an all-time high. These are the same things that I have seen in dreams, in visions, in my experience and interactions with them unseen. These are the things I've experienced within my household. And I know it's among other households, and it's in the political scene, and it's everywhere around us. But yet what we mostly do is we turn a blind eye, we turn around and say, that's their religious practice. And we sit there and say, well, we got to be tolerant of them. Then they'll be tolerant of us. They're not going to be tolerant of us. And as much as I hate the dualistic worldview, which permeates all of mankind's psychological conditioning, there's a time when you've got to sit there and say enough's enough. You've got to sit there and say, what am I doing to bring that perfect love and perfect trust that my faith, my spirituality proclaims? Because even those who have taken up many of these ideas and concepts have not moved away from that previous paradigm to a new paradigm. Now, what I was going to write about on this episode was about an article I read from someone who, and now this isn't a new idea, this has been out there for a long time. Those who have grasped onto this spirituality or that one, who's, left a Christian background and embrace these practices and get up on their soapbox and say, yada, yada, yada. And then later on, they go ahead and go back to they proclaim themselves Christians again, call it all, a bunch of evil, and, really build a backing by downgrading that pathway that they claim they no longer follow. And I think this is because it is really hard to eliminate that indoctrination that always begins as soon as we're born, whether it's those close around us and their political, religious, social views, or as we grow older, the stuff we see in the news, among our friends, they really shape how we view the world, how we view our relationships with each other, the natural world, and just everything else about us. And that there is no way to effectively and completely abolish these ideas, these concepts that the monotheistic faiths rail against. We can't cause these changes in our world while we still hold a tolerant view, only picking and choosing those scriptures of if you've done this to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me, usually referencing those who are poor, impoverished, little children, and stuff like that. If you've done these horrible things to the least of these, you've done it to their Jesus. While at the same time and stuff, waiting for their Jesus to come back and completely annihilate, those who disagree with them, destroy the world, and maybe terraform it back into some sort of paradise that mankind destroyed in the first place. In order to not allow these things to continue means we've got to be vocal. We've got to be adamant that enough is enough. Because what happens when you trap a poor defenseless beast? Well, not necessarily defenseless, but you cage an animal wild from, natural characteristics. You trap them, you beat them. What are they going to do? Eventually, they're either going to become pacified, domesticated, or they're going to lash out. For the last, I won't even say from the establishment of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, but even further back, we have seen this kind of mentality: give a little, take a lot, so to speak. And in the last 1,500 years, we have seen destruction en masse. And at its heart is these faiths, is these ideas that perpetuate not democracy, not even really a republic, but a theocracy. And I mean, even look at King James and the idea of, kings being the anointed representatives of God on earth, usually coronated by who? The church. Of course, at one point it was just the Roman Catholic Church. Eventually it became, other organizations like the Anglican Church. And all these beliefs, all these practices are angled toward monarchy, toward theocracy, because theocracy is a rule under the name of a god where religion and politics, as Frank Herbert states, rode in the same cart, and it always creates the whirlwind. Now, I always thought the whirlwind was a term of destruction, of complete annihilation of anything in its path. But I really believe now that I understand who the wind indweller is, which some people call Gwyn ap Nuth, specifically those among the Circle of the White Stag, and those who have a personal connection to Welsh lore. The whirlwind is change. The whirlwind can either be a blessing for those who wish to overthrow such tyranny, or can be a mighty destruction of freedom. With the Taliban, we see this within its history, within literally, think about it, at least the last 30 plus years, which is also the same period of time that the evangelical and the Republican Party have been enmeshed. And now what's funny and stuff is the reason that the Republican Party and stuff really took to these ideas is they needed a voter base, a base where they can sit there and overtop the competition. The idea of traditional family values. And so originally, the evangelical movement within the Republican Party was merely a political tool, just like their tool of gerrymandering and voter suppression. Tools for power over others. And so when these ideas mixed, we began to see in the domestic realm the idea of a theocracy, a slow push in the direction of their end game. Because if you noticed, that was the time that we saw the first of many whirlwinds, and that was the fight for the women's vote. Now, that may have actually happened a little earlier in time, but its actual application is even newer than the women's rights movement. Because with the idea of patriarchy, which is at the heart of these faiths, is the idea that women should be submissive to men, just as men should be submissive to their overlords, and their overlords should be submissive to the religious leaders who speak for their God. The next whirlwind really started to happen with September 11th. That is what began the extreme radicalization of certain fringe groups towards wanting to reinstitute the Crusades, which of course is the bloodbath that not only was against Muslims over control over Jerusalem, but was also against those Christians who preached a different God than the established status quo. And so thus we began to see the rise of anger towards one monotheistic faith over another monotheistic faith. And also, don't mind my slow fading. The sun decided to grace us with its presence, and my trailer is not dark enough for my light to keep me in focus, which is actually kind of cool looking. But let's see, what was I saying? Oh yes, whirlwinds. We see another whirlwind with the rise of the Satanic Panic, and that's really when the domestic abuse really started. Now, the Satanic Panic wasn't just religiously motivated. It was also brought forth by the new, widely embraced view on the field of psychology, and particularly guided meditations or hypnosis to bring forth repressed memories to the foreground. Now, what most people know nowadays is the power of affirmations. Affirmations are those subliminal messaging that we give ourselves. Now, these are the self-same tools that were used by psychologists who were influenced on wanting praise and control, to give them some sort of legitimacy towards the idea, which isn't a new idea either, that there is a satanic cabal that does sex trafficking, that wishes to overthrow the world into some sort of new dark ages where the idea of Satan ruling supreme, well, read Revelations. That was another realm. And its aftermath is what actually led to such individuals like me who are interested in other things, or even just wanted to play a freaking game, like Dungeons and Dragons and the whole science fantasy movement where magic was embraced, was made a part of our lives, even if that imagination was the only magic that we have. This is because the fear produced by the satanic panic, the fear that was amplified by such movies as The Exorcist, and that realm of things. What did they always have in their basis? The idea of demons and Satan taking control and ruining people's lives and possessing them. So that now we look at various mediumistic tools, which I utilize in my everyday practice, that was taught to me by another, who was taught that by another, as being evil, such as the tarot, a tool, the Ouija board, a tool, scrying balls, for heaven's sake, a tool. And you know what? It was actually this fear of such things that gave me the wonderful idea when I was really little, when I was actually into Magic the Gathering, before my father burned all my cards which were signed by the artists and stuff, because my best friend at the time, his stepfather worked at Wizards of the Coast. Those cards would have paid not only all my bills that I have now, but would have prepared me for even greater things, to maybe even do this stuff that I'm doing now earlier on, and a full college ride. But I digress. I learned that even such games such as Magic the Gathering could be used as a mediumistic tool to provide guidance, inspiration, and maybe a little glimpse beyond the veil that really isn't a veil into future occurrences. Future possible occurrences, because nothing is ever set in stone. Now, this is the reason I created A Dragon's Voice, because I was never heard as a child. When I first had my first real vision, dream that came true, synchronicity, coincidence, I told those closest to me. I told my daddy. You know what my daddy did? Ignored me at first. My grandfather, he embraced me. And it wasn't until later that I would understand that there might have been that issue involved in my own father and his father's relationship. I won't know. And I honestly don't care to know, because I've honestly cut off my ties with my father, finally. And it's because he has become a Christian nationalist, which I'm not surprised about. And I know what those mentalities can do to a child. The emotional abuse, the creates such a ball of tight freaking rubber bands. And what happens when like, okay, so there's this set of videos, and I know I'm pretty sure a lot of people have watched, where this guy, he takes a watermelon and he starts just putting a lot of big rubber bands up on it to see how many and stuff will be on there until it explodes. Well, think of that as what happens with those who go through these kinds of things by those they love, by those in power over them to create laws and enforce those self-same laws. Do you honestly know how many of those people, friends, family, who have suffered so much abuse, discrimination, and persecution, like little rubber bands placed upon them until they explode, mostly to kill themselves? Do you really know how powerful these Christian nationalists really are? The next time you see one of your friends come out, whether as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersexed, and you hear later on down the road that they've killed themselves, and they sit there and say, oh, poor person, if only you reached out. The thing is, I can guarantee you they have reached out. You know what happened? Probably the same thing that I experienced. Ignored at first. Um, yeah, right, you're too young to sit there and make those decisions for yourself. Or, get out of my house, I have no child anymore. Do you know how those individuals cope with such things? Even if they sit there and they continue living, just out of sheer spite, end up under addictions. Do you really know how many of them become the homeless that people sit there and say that if I have nothing against homeless people and stuff, I just don't want them near me. That's the same people Hitler said freaking about the Jews before he mass slaughtered them. How many people, like even now, come out and are accepted? You know why? Because people stood up. People stood up against this tyranny and said enough is enough. And so, what is the source of all these issues? What is the source? It surely isn't political, because politics is just a system. Democracies are just a system. Even our economies are just a system. What is not a system, except for a system of control, is religious fanaticism. Particularly those, and I will continue saying it, particularly those whose doctrines are written in stone. And what I mean by stone is their scriptures, the rock of their foundation, which is the literal word of God. Now, whether that's the Quran, the Torah, the Mishnah, whether that is the New Testament, or even among, and it's even found in the New Age movement. And it is sick and it's disgusting. Really look at those writings of many self-proclaimed channels. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have power. I'm not saying that they don't have experiences that aren't true. What I'm saying is that those things come through a filter, the filter of our own mind. We are given words that we understand, and we use those words to express these things. And so, one of the things that's at the heart of a lot of persecution is these words, is these ideas of some sort of new age. And I mean that in the term of the age of Aquarius, which of course is a zodiacal age. But the thing is that we have also embraced the idea of dispensationalism. Now, that's the idea that throughout history, God, in some way, shape, or form, sends its prophets and stuff like that to institute new laws and to prepare for a new step in human evolution. The thing is, while there may be some golden thread of truth in there, most of it is pure balderdash. The only new age we have is the next breath we take. The only new age we have is the next day that we rise up and we thank life itself for being alive. And so, I know this episode is going to alienate me. I know this episode may seem like I'm fear-mongering, that I'm being just like our persecutors. But see, it's not. It is a clarion call. Because I kept quiet, so many people I loved suffered. The ones I love the most suffer from the ones that they love the most. And so, in closing, I only have 8 minutes left. But in closing, I want to say it's time to get your heads out of the sand. It's time to become intolerant, have intolerance against intolerance. And I mean that in the sense of those who would have control over you. And if that means I am an antichrist, if that means that the red dragon that I follow is Satan himself, I agree. It is better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. A heaven that does not exist. Because in the end, if anyone has done any sort of lick of reading and understanding of what hell is, you will know hell is not a place. Hell is a person. Hell is a lady. A lady who rules over the lands that we all go to. The underworld, the dead, the unseen, which isn't a world after all. It is intimately a part of this one. Intimately a part of this one. And that's another thing I rail against, is the idea that this world is not real. It is an illusion, a set of frequencies, and that there's some sort of transcendence thing out there where salvation and happiness and peace from struggle can come about. There isn't. There is not. And 99% of mankind's suffering is mankind's fault itself. The 1%? The 1% is just natural interactions of the seen and the unseen. Natural events. Think about it. We see, like lately I saw an alligator in captivity and stuff kill one of the handlers. And they sit there and say, oh, that alligator was mad and it's a really sad thing that this happened. And yes, it is a sad thing. Maybe they shouldn't have kept it in captivity in the fucking first place. And it's the same thing for those of us that are in captivity. And we are in captivity. We are in captivity of a civilization hell-bent on controlling of the game Monopoly. Come on. Control the board, right? By buying everything up, buying people off. And so next time you do an investment or you pay your insurance, think about it. Where is that money going? To who is it going? For what purpose? For the last 30 years, for the last 20 years, we had been in Afghanistan over lies and falsehoods perpetuated by the very same people we are dealing with now. We went into Afghanistan looking for Osama bin Laden, looking for the head of Al-Qaeda, looking for weapons of mass destruction that were not there. How much of that money came from your pocketbook? Those children that were killed, that came from your money. Those weapons of mass destruction that we used, because in my opinion, any sort of weapon is a weapon of mass destruction. And so, how much of your money goes towards the hate? How much of your money goes for the destruction? You are literally paying for it. And the sad thing is, not just the fact that our monetary system is an illusion, but the thing is your money isn't even your money. And it's not even the government's money. It's not the bank's money. Follow the money. Who does it go to? For what purposes? Hobby Lobby, for instance. Chick-fil-A, for instance, which I'd say I've never touched, never had a desire, even before I knew about all their Christian bullshit. But the thing is, I followed the money. I did my research. Am I 100% sure that what I researched is true? No, of course not. Because those self-same people, whether we admit it or not, there's always a financial tie when it comes to propaganda. And the thing is, propaganda, or history, which is a form of its own propaganda, is always written by those who win. And those who win are those in power. And those in power tend to, for the last 5,000 years, focused on patriarchal concepts. Concepts of one God in heaven, one king on earth, and everyone to be subservient to men and men's ideas, particularly males. And so this is why this episode is going to piss people off. This is why this episode is going to alienate me from building my business. But the thing is, it needs to get out. It needs to be understood. And if I've at least opened your eyes to do your own research, to look for your own freedom, to stand up for your rights as humans, to remind you of your obligations to yourself, to your family. And I mean that not necessarily in your biological family, but the family you choose, and to your countries at large. To stand up, be not afraid, because the more you're afraid, the more it's going to happen. And so I will end this video satisfied that I got this off my chest. I'm probably going to lose even more possible clients. But you know what? Like Prometheus, I'm just grabbing the fire. It's what you do with it after that that matters. And so I ask you to take these words and come to your own conclusions. As for me, I'm just going to continue what I've been doing. Being a witcher, providing help and guidance to those that seek my help. So, with that, I just want to say be safe, be helpful to one another, and to love yourself because you are important. You are one of those strands of faith that I talked about. And the more people to stand up against that intolerance, the more tolerant our world will be. May you never hunger. May you never thirst. And may the good neighbors, the spirits that saturate this world, the true entities behind all the gods, as many books talk, the gods behind the gods, may they reach out to you. May you have your own fairy tale. If you have any thoughts, concerns, don't be afraid to reach out to me. If you are in harm's way, let me know and I'll help you the best I can. Because that is what being a head of the dragon is, a pendrake. To be a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves, or at least will not be heard by the very same people that are tormenting them. And of course, before I sign off, I've got to do this because this is how I do things like this. This ministry, this work that I do, is being sponsored by my Patreon patrons and viewers like you. If you wish to give to this work, to my work, and want to become a patron, you can go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/RuanDeHayden. I've got various tier levels, and each of them has their own benefits. And if you feel that you want to help, but you can't dedicate a certain amount of fundage for every month, you can give a one-time donation by either going to using PayPal, using my dead name, unfortunately, because I haven't created another account. And I probably won't, just because of things. Or I do accept Cash App. Now, I try not to send this one out because this one is the one I use mostly for my personal stuff. But you can Cash App me. If you don't like PayPal, you don't like other methods, you can Cash App me at the money sign, Ruan D. Hayden. And so come join me on Tuesday for another Witch Talk Radio with Ruan D. Hayden. And hopefully, now that I've gotten some rest and relaxation and recouped over my recent lucid experiences, hopefully I'll be able to do another Fairy Friday with my Patreon patrons, another thing that you get as part of your monthly donations. And I am starting a Dragon's Voice, the podcast. And that's going to be lit because I know a lot of you, listen to podcasts, don't like doing the whole video thing and want to be able to go about and do your thing without either signing up for YouTube Premium where you can leave your phone locked and it'll still go. But that is forthcoming. I am not sure when I'm going to start that, but it is coming. So yeah, there you go. May you never hunger, may you never thirst, and may the good neighbors always be with you.